In 2005, a criminal operation unlike anything Brazil had seen before unfolded right under the noses of the most secure institutions in the country. A gang of 34 thieves managed to infiltrate the Brazilian central bank's vault, stealing a staggering $80 million. The heist was so well planned that it left police baffled for years. The question that remained: how did they manage to pull off such a massive robbery with a bank that was equipped with surveillance cameras, thermal sensors, and other top-tier security measures? Keep watching to find out how this daring gang managed to disappear into the shadows, and why, for many of them, the heist turned out to be their greatest mistake. It was August 8, 2005, a typical Monday morning. The Brazilian federal police were called after receiving a strange report. The central bank in Fortaleza had been robbed. The location was baffling. This was one of the most secured banks in the country. The vault was fortified with cutting-edge surveillance systems. How could anyone possibly breach such security? The police arrived to find an unexpected sight in the basement: a mysterious hole in the ground that led into an underground tunnel. The hole, barely wide enough for a person to crawl through, seemed impossible to navigate. It was clear something massive had been stolen. At first, the estimate was over 100 million real, but later calculations revealed the true scale of the crime: over 164 million real, nearly $80 million in US dollars. As the police surveyed the scene, one officer, determined to get to the bottom of it, suggested they investigate the hole. While some feared there might still be danger, others wondered if the robbers might still be inside. Despite the risks, a fearless officer named Enéas Sobieira volunteered to crawl into the hole. For over an hour, Enéas crawled through a 70-meter-long tunnel supported by wooden planks. The tunnel had everything: ventilation, fans, and lamps still glowing, suggesting that the robbers had just recently left. Enéas was cautious. Every step he took could trigger a trap or worse, a bomb. But he pressed on. When he finally emerged from the tunnel, he found himself just 70 meters away from the bank. The tunnel's exit led to an abandoned house, which was actually an interface for an artificial grass company, a cover for their illicit operation. This seemingly innocent property was the first piece of the puzzle that would reveal how this audacious crime unfolded. The house, painted green to blend into the neighborhood, was designed to camouflage the sand and soil removed from the tunnel. The police were stunned to discover the scale of the operation. The thieves had spent months digging, using manual tools like shovels and pickaxes to avoid detection. They carefully packed the soil into bags and removed them using trucks, drawing the suspicion of locals who began to wonder why so much soil was being hauled out of a residential property. As the police continued to investigate the house, they uncovered the tunnel's true purpose. It was designed to lead directly to the basement of the central bank, where vast amounts of money were kept in large, heavy boxes. The thieves knew exactly how to avoid the security cameras, the thermal sensors, and the other high-tech defenses. The plan was genius and ruthless. Inside the central bank's basement, the thieves found their target. The basement housed massive money boxes that weighed over half a ton each. These boxes were moved around by a giant crane, which the bank workers used to handle the huge amounts of cash. The thieves knew they had a narrow window of opportunity to strike. On the Friday evening before the robbery, the bank workers left and the thieves moved in. They used the crane to block the view of the security cameras and access the money boxes through a narrow passage created by the space between the boxes and the wall. This was the flaw in the bank's security, a blind spot that the thieves knew all too well. Once inside, they filled bags with the stolen money and used carts to move it through the tunnel. The operation was swift. The thieves worked through the weekend, undetected, moving money out of the vault and into the tunnel system. They used slings to drag the bags through the tunnel, each bag containing 5,000 real. By the time the operation was complete, they had stolen 164 million real, enough money to fill 330 bags. The police were left with few clues. The cameras had been blocked, the sensors ignored, and the thieves had made their escape through the underground tunnel without a trace. How could such an operation remain hidden for so long? The police began their investigation, first focusing on the house that served as the entry point for the tunnel. They learned that the house was registered under a fake company, an artificial grass business that was the perfect cover for the operation. But as they delved deeper, the police uncovered a pattern. This robbery seemed eerily similar to another heist that took place in Sao Paulo the year before. The method, the underground tunnels, everything matched. The police began to suspect that the same gang was behind both robberies. As the investigation progressed, the police discovered that one of the thieves, named Charles, had used trucks to transport the stolen money. These trucks were purchased with cash, and the police soon learned that Charles's brother, Marco, was a key figure in the operation. Marco was also linked to a known drug smuggling operation in Sao Paulo, and the police began to connect the dots. Charles and his company were used to transport a portion of the stolen money, but when the truck was intercepted, only a small portion, around 6 million real, was recovered. The rest of the money had been laundered, hidden, or moved. The investigation was far from over, and the police knew they needed to track down the rest of the gang. The police were able to track down some of the thieves through surveillance and wiretaps. They uncovered conversations that hinted at even more stolen money hidden away. But as the investigation unfolded, the police were shocked to discover that some of their own colleagues were involved. The thieves had been blackmailed by corrupt police officers who were demanding a cut of the loot in exchange for keeping quiet. These officers were not just criminals. They were part of a much larger network of corruption that extended all the way into law enforcement. The federal police were finally able to execute a raid on one of the gang's hideouts. They found a massive amount of the stolen money inside, along with weapons and evidence of more corruption. 26 members of the gang were arrested, but the investigation was far from over. The stolen money had been scattered, laundered, and hidden in various properties across Brazil. Among the arrested were key members of the gang, including Antonio and David, who were instrumental in distributing the stolen money. Through their confessions, the police learned about the inner workings of the operation, how the gang had bribed guards, coordinated with insiders, and meticulously planned every detail of the heist. As the investigation continued, the police discovered that some of the thieves were still living in fear. Fear of other criminals who wanted a piece of the stolen money. Many of them had been kidnapped by rival gangs, and the ransom money was often paid directly to corrupt police officers. The investigation took a dramatic turn when the police intercepted a phone call from one of the thieves, who was still trying to launder the stolen money. Using this information, the police were able to track down the location of more hidden cash. As they raided another property, they discovered more than 12 million real in bags hidden in the walls. But there was one major player still missing: Moises, the mastermind behind the tunnel. He had been careful, hiding from the police for years. But the law was closing in, and Moises' days were numbered. In 2009, after years of evading capture, Moises was finally tracked down through his wife's phone calls. The police made a strategic move, convincing him to leave his apartment by staging a car accident. When he stepped out of the building, he was surrounded by federal police officers and arrested on the spot. Moises, one of the chief architects of the heist, was finally in custody. The police had pieced together the entire operation and identified him as one of the 3 main masterminds behind the central bank robbery. The investigation didn't end with Moises' arrest. The police were still uncovering the full scale of the operation and tracking down missing criminals. However, they were able to recover some of the stolen money, about 34 million real, but much of it had been laundered or hidden away. Despite the efforts of the police, not all of the criminals were captured, and some of the stolen money was never recovered. But justice had been served for most of the gang members, who were sentenced to long prison terms. The central bank robbery left a lasting impact on Brazil. It wasn't just the amount of money stolen, it was the scale of the operation. The use of underground tunnels became a new trend in Brazilian bank robberies, and the police found dozens of tunnels in the years that followed. But the real lesson from the central bank robbery was that no one, not even the most secure institutions, is immune to a well-planned heist. This story of betrayal, corruption, and cunning masterminds finally came to a close. The gang members were arrested, and most of the stolen money was recovered. But for the few who managed to escape, their lives would never be the same. The impact of the robbery rippled through Brazil, leaving behind a legacy of crime and lawlessness that would continue to haunt the country for years to come. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of the most shocking bank heists in history, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Stay tuned for more stories that uncover the secrets behind the world's most daring criminal operations.